It's the most comprehensive search for signatures that might be coming from extraterrestrial technology. One of the things we've discovered as we understand more about the universe is that it looks more like us.
This is the Discovery Files podcast from the U.S. National Science Foundation. I'm Nate Podker. Mankind has always looked up into the sky and told stories about the stars. In myths and folklore such as Orion the Hunter and Taurus the Bull from the ancient Greeks, or the Wolf Trail of the Milky Way from Native American tradition, the stars in space have long captured the imagination of the peoples that observe them. Since 2016, Breakthrough Listen has been monitoring space, looking for radio waves sent from distant stars, seeking to confirm the existence of life beyond Earth by using tools such as NSF's Green Bank Observatory. Our guest today is David DeBoer, a research astronomer at UC Berkeley and project manager at Breakthrough Listen. Dr. DeBoer, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
So I like to start with a little bit of background as we get into things. How did you become interested in radio astronomy?
Well, like most things, it wasn't necessarily a direct linear route, but I always have been interested in the physical sciences. Even as a kid, I always liked physics. My favorite book was this book about atoms and stuff, and how the universe works. But I never really thought I'd go straight into astronomy, let alone radio astronomy. But I grew up in the high country in Colorado, and one of the it's a beautiful place, and one of the beautiful things are the skies. The stars are very, very vivid. The moon, you could reach out and touch it. So I have always appreciated the beautiful skies. And then, I also like to understand how things work and the kind of the origin of things. Where did things start? I like, where did words come from and so on. Well, astronomy and astrophysics are kind of the ultimate in terms of understanding how things work and understanding our origins and the ultimate origins of the universe and humanity and, important things like that.
Right. And when you have that environment where the noise or the light pollution is low enough that you can really see the stars, it is very much different experience than being in a city.
Yeah. People don't realize. In fact, it can be hard to recognize the constellations in those because we're in the city. You only see those stars, and they just pop out. Whereas, when you're out in the high country, there are so many stars you can kind of lose track of where you are in the sky. But you can see the band of the Milky Way, which is fantastic. And I do get to go to observatories still and get to appreciate that view.
Right. And then when you're looking through things, it kind of changes the context too. So I want to move into your work a little bit. Can you tell us what is Breakthrough Listen?
Right. So Breakthrough Listen, I guess, first of all, it's the most comprehensive search for signatures that might be coming from extraterrestrial technology. And I'm using the words a little bit carefully because in the past, we've typically called this endeavor SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And there, we're kind of making some inferences on what intelligence might be. But really what we're doing is we're looking for evidences of technology that we have the ability to detect. So it kind of is an analog to biosignatures. We tend to call this field now technosignatures. It's really been decades of work, and we are leveraging the pioneering work at academia. Obviously, Berkeley has been a long player in that. The SETI Institute, SETI is in its name. As well as NASA. Early on, NASA was big into this. The Breakthrough Listen initiative, though, is funded by the Breakthrough Prize Foundation, which is a private foundation, and they fund a set of what they call breakthrough initiatives with the goal of understanding, humanity's place in the universe, looking for all of the fundamental big questions like, are we alone? That's what Breakthrough Listen does. Are there other, signatures of technology out there? Are there other places that are habitable that we can detect? Can we, the nearest star, in fact, has potentially planets of order Earth-like around a star that's somewhat sun-like. Can we get there? That's another initiative. And actually kind of maybe particularly germane now, what does that infer for us trying to cohabitate with other races, other viewpoints and so on?
Can you tell me about how you use something like the Green Bank telescope?
Right. Yeah. So one of our goals is to use every telescope all the time. And that's, we think is going to be important to find these signals, which are going to be very likely, very elusive. If they're not, well, that would be amazing. We probably would have found one, but they're going to be very elusive signals. So we want to use all the telescopes all the time as much as we can. And so in some of these we use in a mode we call commensal, which means that another user uses these telescopes, points them, picks the frequency that they're going to operate at, and so on. and we hang on, we piggyback on that, or we call it commensal because I guess that sounds better than piggyback. And that's actually very, very effective, especially with these new arrays coming online, like the SKA, but we use the Meerkat telescope. We're starting to use the Very Large Array in New Mexico in this mode. And that works because you can see a big chunk of the sky, and we know where a lot of stars are, and we look around these stars. But we also like the ability to point very, very sensitive telescopes where we want to point them for a few reasons. One, we want to follow up on things that might have blipped into our consciousness, by a signal we found that we want to follow up on. Or, we're scientists, we like to have hypotheses. So, we want to come up with our own experiment and where we might want to look and point the telescope. So the Green Bank telescope, or the GBT, is the world's largest telescope, let alone radio telescope. It's an iconic thing in our field. And so, the ability to get to point that thing and look at stuff that we want to look at for a large chunk of the time is wonderful. And we have a very productive collaboration with the Green Bank telescope people. And in fact, we've deployed the largest processor on the back of that telescope that can search, really slice and dice the frequency up in very fine chunks. And one of the goals we want to do is provide a benefit to other astronomers. So they are allowed to use our back end. We, in fact, encourage them to use the hardware we produce. And they also have produced important science. A lot of it relates to transient phenomena, things called fast radio bursts and so on. And so it's kind of a great dual use. We get to use it. We've deployed it there. And we are excited that other researchers can use that for other types of science.
One of the interesting things about this Breakthrough Listen project is bringing together the different resources to get an amount of data that's very different from what SETI has historically had. Can you talk a little bit about the amount being collected through this endeavor compared to historically?
Yeah, I mentioned that, we expect that technosignatures will be very elusive. And so really the goal is to look at a lot of places a lot of the time over many frequencies. The mantra, we really all sky all the time, all frequencies, maybe we'll get there. But in terms of the amount of data that's collected and analyzed, we actually, it kind of spans from where in the system you're looking, all the way from the raw data, which is the data that streams off the telescopes. And when we work in these radio telescope arrays, we get more data coming off the telescopes than the worldwide internet traffic. So we certainly can't save that. But we do process that, kind of slightly channelized version of that. And so we look through all this for these very fine signals that we don't think nature can make. We understand nature pretty well. We think we've sorted out what it can make on its own without technology assistance. And so we want to look for these very compressed signals in frequency and time. So to do that, we actually want to look in very, very finely sampled frequency and time space for signatures that pop out and that we don't think nature does. So this idea of going from the raw data that we look through, kind of streaming off the telescope, to slightly processed data that we look through in more detail, to data we actually save and archive for future posterity and for future searches, it spans actually many, many, many orders of magnitude. And one of the key goals of this project, though, is to actually get a large open source archive that people can use and the tools to download it. It's all very well to have data out there, but it's just a big chunk of data that you can't do anything with. So we currently have about 22 petabytes of data. Petabytes are pretty big. So of that 22 petabytes, we actually are excited for people to look at chunks of it, and we have tools that can look at certain chunks of it. If you go to Breakthrough Listen, look first on the internet, you'll find the tools and the search algorithms that you can use on that data.
Very cool. So do you think it's an inevitability that you will find some sort of signal that seems to be manufactured or quote unquote alien life of some sort?
Yeah, I guess it depends how far in the future you're looking. One of the things we've discovered as we understand more about the universe is that it looks more like us, right? We've always known there are a lot of stars. We know there are a lot of stars that look like our sun or that could support life or have the stability long enough for life to develop. Right. And one of the big revolutions over my career has been the planetary evolution. When I was in school, we knew of 9, then it was 8 planets, and that was the whole catalog. And now there are literally thousands and thousands of planets that we've discovered, and we've, as the technology improves, we find more and more planets that are more and more Earth-like. So, the chances of some sort of life developing on many of those and some sort of intelligent life seems to me inevitable, right? The universe is massive. It's not infinite, but it's huge. And there are billions and billions of opportunities for life to develop. And it seems likely that even in our galaxy, which is one of billions and billions of galaxies, that there would be another technological civilization. But that said, the universe is very, very large, and even the nearest stars are very far away. And so detecting those signatures is going to be hard. Now, we have some positive news in that if you look at the loudest signals that humans can transmit and the quietest signals that humans can detect, we do actually have the technology to detect ourselves through a good chunk of our galaxy. A quarter or even more of our galaxy, we could detect ourselves, assuming we knew where to look, when to look, and the frequency to look at. In terms of detecting our TV, I Love Lucy and so on, those signals are two things. One, they're much, much, much weaker. And also, there's information content in them. So they actually get modulated. So they get spread out over frequency. And so it makes it harder because it blends in more to the background. So those are going to be very, very elusive. So, initially, we're essentially trying to target these deliberate signals that someone might be putting out, either to be noticed. Some people like to be noticed. Everyone it's like the ultimate TikTok video, right? They want to be noticed and send something out there. But also, we do transmit very, very strong signals for our planetary radar, right? We map the planets in our solar system with these very, very bright planetary radars. We have weather radar, much, much weaker. We're looking at using lasers to propel light sails, which would be incredibly strong blasts of laser. And we are starting programs to look at laser light, in the optical and the infrared.
So one of the other projects you've worked on that NSF helped fund was something called Casper. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, Casper has been a multi-decade program that has been very successful. There's the literal acronym, which is kind of a cumbersome, as all astronomy acronyms are, called the Center for Astronomical Signal Processing and Electronics Research. And what this means is for radio telescopes particularly, which is kind of where I've mostly specialized, it's really, we need fast computers to look at all that data coming off. Right? A radio telescope collects radio waves, which is electromagnetic radiation, just like light, but we can actually download it and get it to data just like a radio, and then we can channelize it. So we want to process that data, and it's very broad bandwidth, very fast time cadences. So in the past, before Casper, people would spend 5 or a decade to develop a specialized digital back-end, radio receiver for the telescope. And, that's sometimes the life of a telescope. And, you certainly want to not wait 5 years before you can adequately use a telescope. So what Casper has done is say, well, look, let's leverage what's going on in Silicon Valley and other places and use Ethernet and use all of the best tools and develop our own stuff that we then can port to radio telescopes. And that's been what it's done. It's developed boards, firmware, hardware, and so on. Well, now with the tools and our understanding of the early universe and the precision that we understand the early universe, we have the tools to make these telescopes that are targeting this period in the universe's life that we've never had access to. Specifically, that's after something that we call the cosmic microwave background, which I think many people are familiar with. And it's quite amazing that we have this picture of essentially a day in the life of the universe as a baby. It's incredibly precise, which is remarkable. And then as the universe developed galaxies and stars and black holes, we get a very increasingly accurate picture of the universe, as an adult. But this period of after, as a toddler and primary school and high school and college, we just have snippets of, kind of exceptional periods of life. And so we really don't know the details of how it developed. How did these structures start? How did the first stars and black holes and galaxies really start to formulate, to form at the cores of this dark matter? And we now have the technology and really largely leveraging all of the commercial technology out there to build these systems. So I've been very fortunate to have a couple systems in South Africa The first one was called PAPER, or the Precision Array Probing the Epoch of Ionization, fully supported by the National Science Foundation. And it really took the field along a new direction of trying to target very specific scales of the universe. And so we learned a lot from that array, and we got funded to build something called the Hydrogen Epoch of Ionization Array, called HERA, which is a much bigger telescope in South Africa. These telescope is built in the northern, sparsely populated region of South Africa in the Karoo, where the South African government has seen it fit to put a lot of amazing infrastructure that helps us. Now, of course, they did it for an international project called the Square Kilometer Array, but they've been amazing partners to support our activities on site for HERA, first for PAPER, and now for HERA. So HERA it's an experiment. We're in year 6 of ostensibly a 7 or 8 year project, collecting more and more data as time goes on. And we're hoping that with data of the season we just finished, we're hoping that we can actually start to get these first pictures of the universe, as a toddler, as just kind of a day in the life of the universe in primary school. And, as we all know, that's an incredibly formative period of humans' life. And that also is a very formative, pun intended, formative period in the universe, how it started and how it evolved. So we're hoping that we now have data in the can. It takes a year or more to process that data because the signals are, a million times smaller than the background, what we normally call the background signal. So we have to peel away about a million parts of the signal to get the little nugget left. So it takes a while. And then we have 2 more seasons of observing, and maybe we'll go forward, and we hope to fill in that picture.
Special thanks to David DeBoer. For the Discovery Files, I'm Nate Podker. Discover how the U.S. National Science Foundation is advancing research at nsf.gov.